Hello and welcome to another episode on Strilingo. If there is one thing that binds women all over the world, it is our menstrual cycle. And if you're listening to this podcast in India, or you would be very familiar with the sanitary napkin brand Whisper. Did you know that Whisper is a special name that Procter and Gamble has issued for some countries like India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Japan? In all other countries, Procter and Gamble uses the name always for the same product. So I guess the name itself has a lot to do with how we look at menstrual cycle in this country, right? Today I have Candice Chirwa with me. Have you ever heard of the term Minister of Menstruation? So Candice is the Minister of Menstruation in South Africa. She is the board member of Menstrual Rights Global. Menstrual Rights Global is basically a voluntary organization advocating for the right to thrive during your menstrual cycle. So it's actually a group of media specialists, health activists, frontline health workers, researchers from every corner of the world who have come together to fight for the recognition and acknowledgement of those experiencing challenges with their menstrual health. So, Candice, welcome to Strilingo. I'm so grateful that we could be doing this today.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, I'm really excited to have the conversation. I think the introduction you had about Whisper being a brand and how that intentionally, sort of perpetuates the stigma, because when we have our periods, we're always told we shouldn't talk openly about it. We should keep it to ourselves. So having the title Whisper associated with a period product just subliminally implies that when young girls have to buy these products, especially if they're buying Whisper, then they're like, I shouldn't let anyone know that I'm on my period. And yeah, I'm excited for our conversation just to unpack a lot of those things that I think a lot of normal individuals wouldn't really know about how these period stigmas exist in society. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Let us start off with the stigmas in society. I'd like to understand, because you are from South Africa, I would like to understand what are the stigmas associated in your country with regards to periods. And I will tell you if we match on that front or we have very different stigmas. Let's hear some of the stigmas associated with periods in your country.
Well, the first thing is if a girl starts her period at a very early age, whether it's 8, 9, or 10, there's this assumption that she got her period because she was having sexual relations or she was being naughty with boys. And that just shows that there's a lack of education around sexual and reproductive health, because people generally don't understand that menstruation is the last stage of puberty. So when young girls are developing, you see their hips are widening, their breasts are fully developing, they're gaining pubic hair, and menstruation is the last stage of puberty. So it shouldn't necessarily be a thing of she is having sexual relationships, because that's just the stigma that exists in South African societies. Another one that we do have is that you shouldn't enter a place of worship or go to church on your period. Because there's this idea that you need to be pure when you're when you're going to church, and so your period is considered impure or dirty. And this has been debunked by a lot of menstrual activists, such as myself, to say, the act of the uterine lining shedding itself isn't dirty, because if anything in the vagina or the uterine lining was dirty, we would have infections, would be hospitalized, would be sick. So the blood in itself, the uterine lining in itself, is actually clean. It's actually full of essentials and nutrients that, if the egg was fertilized, would make for a place for a baby to grow. So these are things that we often find having conversations with, right? Another thing that I find to be an interesting taboo is if a young girl uses a taboo, uses a tampon or menstrual cup, it means they're going to break their virginity or break their hymen. And so there's a lot of stigma attached to the menstrual products as well. And again, having to debunk that, to say, well, the hymen being a thin layer, elastic layer covering the opening, the vaginal opening, actually shrinks as you get older. And as you reach that last stage of puberty, being menstruation, the hymen is at the bottom, that cannot even be seen. And also, there are people who are born without hymens, and if you are are someone who is an active person that likes playing sports or going to the gym, you can stretch your hymen out because it's a thin elastic layer. So there's no way that a tampon or menstrual cup can break it because you're not having sexual intercourse with these products. And these are things that we often have to find sort of debunking in South Africa, because in South Africa communities, we also have this really weird thing that happens when girls turn a certain age, which is usually 16 or 18. They go under this practice called virginity testing, where they are brought into a room to look to see if they're still a virgin. And it's difficult to prove virginity when it is a social construct, right? It isn't something that you can physically prove from the physical biology of the female reproductive system. So yeah, I think those are the top 3 interesting menstrual taboos that exist in SA. You do get your weird things like, if I wash my hair on my period, all of my hair will fall out. And I think the whole message around these menstrual taboos are really to, again, perpetuate, like, whisper, keep it to yourself. Don't let people know. Isolate yourself so that people don't know you're on your period, because in the event that you stay in your clothes, you might embarrass yourself, you might embarrass other people. And that is, it's so crazy that things like that still exist in today's society.
See, we are women, we are contemporaries, but there are so many myths in your country, right from, getting your periods early could mean that a child is sexually active, which has nothing to do, both have nothing to do with each other, to wearing tampons could break your hymen. So I wonder where these stigmas came from, because these are such biases against women. To tell you about India, Candice, most of it is centered around shame. When I was growing up, I remember that if I had to buy a packet of sanitary napkin, the shopkeeper, the pharmacist would actually wrap it in a newspaper and put it in a plastic bag and then give it to me, so that nobody knows what I was buying. If I went to a pharmacy where there were males around me as customers, I would have to wait to find that alone time with the pharmacist to buy my product. I would have to make sure that my the male members at home did not know that I was going through this. So I'm not saying it's all pervasive, but this used to be the situation once upon a time. Shame was an integral part of menstrual cycle. So on that regard, I think both of us, we would connect. It's the same thing. When it comes to accessibility of sanitary napkins, where would you say that you guys stand in terms of, is it available for all? Is it affordable for all?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting is that we in South Africa, we have a very progressive constitution. We have one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. It was fascinating that I think a couple of months ago, the Western news were saying that France has become the first country to abolish abortion or sort of provide abortion rights. South Africa was the first. We've had it since 1994, and I think South Africa has had a very progressive gender equality aspect to how women, children, people who menstruate, people within the queer community should be treated from a policy perspective. But when it comes to the implementation, that's where it gets a little bit, I guess, lost in translation. For instance, in 2017, the South African government created the Sanitary Dignity Framework program. So it's ultimately a framework that lists the way in which governments, organizations, individuals should ensure to eradicate period poverty towards girl learners. And in particular, there's a specific focus on government to ensure that there is a specific distribution of period products, disposable period products, in schools and in public institutions such as clinics, hospitals, universities. Where we are lost in translation is when government struggles to procure, finding the right local period partner to distribute these products. Oftentimes what would happen is they would provide a lot of money, grant money to organizations that were started overnight, and then they would order products overseas and white label and not actually empower the economy of saying we are a local period product company. So there is often a lot of corruption that exists in these spaces. But I think from a finance point of view, we removed the luxury tax off our period products, but it still makes it very difficult for people who live in deep poverty to think about whether they want to put food on the table or actually buy period products to ensure that their girl child or the woman or the people menstruating in the household can go to work or could go to school. So there's still that dilemma that exists because we live in a very unequal society. And so people would have to negotiate to say, with this 300 Rand that I have, are we putting food? Are we paying for the lights? Are we ensuring that, we can put clothes for warmth because we're going into winter? And then what's remaining is they don't even have enough to buy one packet of pads, which is anywhere between averaging 25, 30 Rand. So it is a bit expensive. And what you realize is that sometimes girls or people who menstruate require more period products than just one packet. Because if you have a heavy flow, you'd maybe need the heavier one, which is more expensive. Then you have to accommodate your symptoms. So if you are dealing with pain, you need painkillers. If you need some form of like any other symptom care, essential care to deal with fatigue or any other element, those add up. So it turns out that having a period is very expensive. And I think in general, South Africa has only started to scratch the surface to say, how do we ensure that we equip the girl child with period products so that they can go to school? And those conversations are definitely being had. I sit as part of the South African Menstrual Health Coalition task team, and with that is formed at the Department of Women, Youth and People with Disabilities. And government is very committed to donating these period products, but they just don't know where to get the period products because they are reliant on donations. And I think this means that government itself needs to legislate a menstrual health rights bill so that every year there is money allocated to ensure that government is either distributing through local period product partners or actually buying these products in bulk and ensuring that they are easily and freely accessible in South Africa. So yeah, I'm glad that we're a society that is at least open to talk about it and at least has a government that has a period positive approach to it. I mean, even the person that leads the coalition, he himself is a man. So that is a good step in the right direction. I just think we need to now look at how we implement it on the ground because it's good to have the talk, but now we need to match that with the action.
Like you said, that there is definite intention, but then a lot gets lost in translation. Our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in 2020, when he was giving the Independence Day speech, mentioned sanitary napkins and sent a message to our 1.4 billion population that menstruation is very natural. It's a biological process. It's as simple as eating or sleeping, and it should be treated as such. And since then, menstrual pads are being sold for 1 rupee across more than 6,000 government oriented or government supported medical stores all across the country. So that is a definite change in India because, truth be told, like you said, menstruation is not just about having your periods. It's an expensive process depending upon the kind of flow that you get, whether you need medication during that time, whether you need leaves during that time. And so for women who are at the lower rung of the ladder, they cannot afford it at all times if it's not made affordable to them. 1 rupee is just 1 rupee in India. So I think that the government's intention is there. We have these institutions or small medical stores that are government funded. So if you go to these stores, you get access. So there are 7,000 across the country, but let's be honest, we are a population of 1.4 billion. So we need many more. But Prime Minister Narendra Modi, definitely being a man, like you said, being a man, he has taken that initiative. And we're very, very grateful because he actually enabled women to have these conversations in a very natural, normal manner without having to go through any kind of shame. But let's get back to where we started from, the taboos associated with menstrual cycle. Now, as the Minister of Menstruation, Candice, you not only have to provide sanitary napkins or make these things affordable, you also have to break mindsets.
Right.
And how does your organization help do that?
Like just to add on to the point that you mentioned about men's active role to answer this question, I think the role and responsibility in eradicating period poverty doesn't just rely on women and girls and people who menstruate. And I think that is one taboo that we have to unpack, where women and girls, it's just a women and girls issue, menstruation is just that, and therefore it's our responsibility. It involves every person, including men and boys, because in particular, men and boys have a responsibility in building this period-friendly world that we want to envision. And that includes, if they are employers and they employ people who menstruate, creating period-friendly policies to ensure that when I go to the bathroom at work, I have a safe and accessible wash facility that also has access to the necessary products that I need. If I'm at work and I need access to menstrual medicine, there's a vending machine. These things can be applied no matter the industry, because we've seen with a lot of studies done that a lot of women and people who menstruate would either revert to taking a form of birth control so that they can be able to work, because if they don't go to work, it impacts their ability to receive any form of income, right? So that is a major thing that I think a lot of men need to realize. They still, unfortunately, to this day, carry the power of making the decisions, whether it's in policy, whether it's for corporations or companies we work for. So they need to be educated about the importance of menstrual health, even from an early age, right? And I think boys need to be incorporated in this. Boys need to be having open conversations about what it means to show up for people who menstruate, and most importantly, what it means to be a supportive partner with someone who menstruates. Because you can imagine the amount of people I've come across, like men I've come across, who would disappear for 7 days because their partner's just menstruating, and they're like, I don't want to deal with that. It's not my duty. I don't want to come across that. My partner is very moody. She deals with me. No, men, you have a responsibility, because especially if you want to raise girl children, and then let's say you become a single dad, you can't just leave it to the woman in your life or people who menstruate to teach. You have a responsibility to create a safe environment. So I thought I would just add on to that it is commendable that we do have Prime Minister Modi, we have men in spaces such as the South African Menstrual Health Coalition taking up the cause to say, I need to speak openly about this.
Yes.
But now to answer your question about education. So with my organization, Curate in South Africa, we use it as a vehicle to reach any person to learn about menstrual health, to learn about period poverty, but to have open conversations in a way that's fun and engaging, and not just sort of discouraging. Because I think when we're having conversations about sexual and reproductive health, it is important to realize that these are things that impact people. And so people need the opportunity to critically think and apply, but also have the opportunity to speak on their own experiences. And so with our workshop, it's a matter of understanding the balance between how do we provide objective learning to say this is what biology and the facts say, but also being mindful of our periods, that my period could be different from your period, that we still need to be speaking openly about it and being empowered about our lived experiences. So with Curate, we travel around the country in South Africa. We educate a lot of young people around menstrual health. We also educate a lot of adults, especially in corporate spaces, to say, you have a responsibility to teach younger people, but you also have a responsibility to speak openly about these things in the environment that you create. And then with the role as Minister of Menstruation, I think I always speak on my own personal experience with my first period, because it is it is something that I think sort of created or motivated me or inspired me to be who I am today. When I had my first period at the age of 10, it honestly felt like I don't know, it felt like I was dying. When I think about it in that moment, I was coming back from school. It was an ordinary day. Nothing major happened. I was just in the school transport. And I just remember this specifically, just feeling this intense cramp that I've never felt before. And I was a very active child. I loved playing, I loved riding bikes. I loved playing cricket, because in the block of flats that I stayed in, I was the only girl and there was mostly boys. So I had to just adapt to be like, I also want to have fun. And so I had a little bit of a tomboy era. And it was fascinating when I remember just getting into the bathroom when I got home and just looking at my underwear and just seeing blood. And that moment will stick with me, I think, for the rest of my life, because it just felt as if the walls were closing in. And I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know who to turn to. And it really was scary because no one had this conversation with me about what is your period, how to prepare for it. You're growing up as a girl. This is what you can expect. No one had that conversation with me. So I I struggled. I struggled. And when my mom came home, I then made the decision to say, you know what, I'm gonna tell her because I'm not gonna just use tissue paper the whole day. It's not gonna work here. And she just said, okay, this is what's happening. You have started your period, you are growing up, and this is a pad, and make sure no one knows that you're on your period. And I think for me, that last part stuck with me because it's like, make sure no one knows, make sure no one sees you're on your period. And that for me made me feel like, am I the only one that goes through this in the entire world? Am I the only one that has to, I don't know, navigate the scary time every single month? I can't even speak to my mom. I can't speak to my older sister. What's happening? And so I internalized that shame and stigma for 11 years because I started at 10. I became the Minister of Menstruation at the age of 21. And that was through conversations that I was having, reading about period poverty, understanding why we're still having this thing such as period poverty. And that just, again, made me realize that this is a natural biological function. And I need to unlearn my own stigma as a way to use my platform to empower others to speak openly about menstrual health. So I think, to make a very long story short, when people are listening to this, I think they shouldn't realize, like, they shouldn't underestimate the power of their voice. You would be surprised if you speak openly about a specific issue and how that could have people want to engage. And you'd be surprised if you start something, especially a community initiative, how people would want to come and support because everyone wants to change the world for the better. And so if you are passionate about climate change, if you're passionate about politics, if you're passionate about youth empowerment and youth development, and you're just like, where do I start? Start with using your voice, speak out, have engagement, speak to people, learn from other people, and then see what other solutions, are lacking in the spaces, and then create the solution, be the solution. Because that is what for me Curate was. It was filling in the gap to say there's no menstrual education in South Africa. Let's let's fill it up. Yeah.
I'm just happy that you took the other route because there must have been many more girls uh, prior to you getting your periods who got their periods but did not think of voicing their concerns regarding the hush hushness around this entire thing. But I'm just so glad that you had it in you. You had that power in you, not becoming just another face in the crowd, but taking a step aside and saying that let me do something different, let me become the voice for so many people who want to speak about periods openly but cannot. Just to tell you a little bit story about my first periods. I got my
Sure.
periods when I was 9 years old. And,
Wow.
yes, I just got up in the morning one day and I saw that, there was blood. And I screamed for my mother and she came and then she said, okay, I will give you a pad. Honest to God, just
Mm,
like you, Candice, I had no clue what a
mm,
sanitary napkin was till then. But not only my mother, my father was also so supportive during that period that
mm,
I did not feel at home, at least, that this was something that I have to keep quiet about, at least when I was with my father and my mother and my sister. But when I stepped out into the world, that's when my mother started telling me that don't say these things very openly because you're supposed to keep this private. At home, you can talk to your parents, but outside, everybody is not going to take it as normally as we do. And that's when I realized that period is a matter of shame. But,
mm,
just look at us today. We are two women from two different countries altogether, and we are talking about it so openly, which simply goes to show that the shame, the taboo, the stigma associated with a topic like this is actually waning.
Yeah.
It people are becoming more vocal. I just feel, I just hope that this is not only an urban phenomena, that if you're living in urban cities, like I am from Bombay, in Bombay maybe you will not find the shame and stigma as much as you would find it in rural villages or smaller towns. So I think by talking about this, we are able, I hope we are able to get our message across to people who actually need to hear this, that there is no taboo. Just by using tampons, or it does not mean that you will lose your virginity, which actually means that your hymen will break. So I
Right.
mean, look at the concerning taboos associated with all of this. I'm just glad, Candice, that you are actually running an organization where you are pulling in talent from all across the world, who are making their own efforts in speaking about period poverty, in speaking about menstruation in the most normal manner. I think the purpose of this podcast also is to make menstruation appear normal in society. What do you have to say?
Right. So yeah, I think I would also just like to add on to like my role as a board member at Menstrual Rights Global. Menstrual Rights Global is an incredible initiative where we're advocating for menstrual health to be recognized as a human right. And I love the fact that it is people from all over the world that can contribute their academic knowledge, that can contribute their artistic ability to say, let's collaborate as a way to bring some form of awareness to this issue that is so highly stigmatized. Because when we think about it, menstrual rights wasn't this openly spoken about within the
Right.
international space, right? So being a part of Menstrual Rights Global is so incredible in the sense that we can identify any academic, any activist, any community initiative to say, be a part of this organization, contribute whatever time you want. If you want to write a blog, you're more than welcome to. If you want to see the events that we virtually host, come and join. If you want to learn, if you want to be volunteering your time, do so, because I think each and every one of us have a responsibility to eradicate period poverty. So I think it to end it off, it's for me to say that period poverty, again, isn't just a woman and girls issue. It requires everyone. And the theme for Menstrual Health Day is a period-friendly world. So I want to end it off to ask the listeners, when you think of a period-friendly world, what do you think of? What do you see? And when you're seeing these things, is it actually a reality? And if it's not a reality, what can you do to make sure that it is, so that we can at least all live in this period-friendly world? I think that for me, it's very important to say that this issue isn't just an academic or activist issue. It involves anyone. So if you're a father, if you're a teacher, if you're a bus driver, you have a role in building this period-friendly world.
Absolutely. They say that charity begins at home. So we, all of us who have now gotten comfortable talking about menstrual cycle, we can teach our young boys and girls from a very early age that, this is absolutely normal, so that when they grow up, they start talking to, when they become parents, they start talking to their kids. And that is how you actually bring about a change in society, because one person cannot reach out to everybody, but in every home, there is one person who can bring about that change. And that is so many homes. And that is how you bring about a collective change. I'm just happy that you said, when I asked you that how do you actually empower people or educate people, you said that we do it through fun sessions. That's the best takeaway from this podcast today, because period is not supposed to be, definitely not something that we are supposed to be ashamed of. We actually might celebrate ourselves during these 4 or 5 days that we get our periods. It's something that is common only to women. It is something that enables us to bring life on earth. And instead of feeling ashamed, or instead of feeling dejected, or instead of feeling like an outcast in society for those days, I think the moment we start celebrating ourselves when we get our menstrual cycle, that it's a sense of positivity being sent out into the world.
100%. Period.
Period friendly, period positive, and let's eradicate any negative conversations around menstrual cycle. Thank you so much, Candice, for your time. It
You.
was really a wonderful session. Honest to God, I have never had a conversation on menstrual cycle. to this extent with anybody. This was the first conversation. I learned so many things. And like I said, if there is one thing that unites women all over the world, it is our menstrual cycle.
100%. Thank you so much for having me. It was
Thank
really
you.
interesting. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.